Hi, I'm Bede Hill, and this is the D-Word podcast, where we talk dementia. Welcome along to another D-Word podcast, where this week my guest is Katya De Louisa, a dementia educator and author who is based in Costa Rica. Katya, it's great to have you here on the D-Word. We've been to a number of countries, never been to Costa Rica, so it's very much a first for us. There is loads to talk about, I know, but before we get into that, I mean, how did you get involved in working in dementia in the first place?
Well, I've been in Costa Rica for 43 years, and during that time, I went to the States for about 2 years, and I've been a visual artist for most of my life, for about 50 years now. And what I did was I focused on creating arts programs that had a therapeutic benefit to different populations, like street children, and I worked in some orphanages for a while, and developmentally disabled adults. And while I was in Florida, a small nursing home asked me if I could develop a therapeutic arts program for her residents. It was a very small nursing home, about 21 residents. And I started working there, and that was my first encounter with dementia, and that was in 2000. And I did put together a program that they could all do, but it was a one-on-one program, so I had enlisted volunteers. And then I started working with the Alzheimer's Association and hospice, and we started doing conferences presenting that program to different international organizations, actually. And from there on, it's just been nonstop because I love people with dementia. I see them in a completely different way than a lot of people see them.
I mean, at the beginning, when you started, I mean, what was the kind of landscape of dementia in Costa Rica?
I wasn't in Costa Rica. I was in Florida. I'd gone to Florida for 2 years. And so I worked in Florida for 2 years. I went around the country in the United States giving seminars on this program that I had developed. Then I came back to Costa Rica. So then I came back to Costa Rica around 2003. And so I've been here working with this in Costa Rica since then. We have very few resources. We've had very few resources. They're starting to increase now. But we're a third world country. We're a tiny, tiny little country, and the availability of help for people with dementia or families with dementia is very limited.
Yeah, I guess with a diverse population, and I would imagine lots of rural areas that it's difficult to get to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have about 4.5 million people here, probably less than that. So, I mean, we're not even the size of a major city as far as population goes. The advantage that we have in Costa Rica is that because it's so small, you can get anywhere in a day. So while just right after COVID, I started a program that's called Rural Dementia Education. And it's for the rural areas. And I'm just trying to build that program right now, where we actually go into the rural areas and give talks on dementia and try to coordinate resources in their local areas if they have any in their local areas.
That must be a learning experience for both sides, I guess.
Absolutely. All I can say is I learned by my mistakes.
Yeah, as we all do. Tell me a little bit about the book. I mean, Journey Through the Infinite Mind, the Science and Spirituality of Dementia. Okay.
While I was in the States for that 2.5 years, working in the field of dementia, and I was the only, when I did conferences, I was the only presenter that didn't have a university degrees after her name. So it was very difficult for me in many senses for people to start taking what I saw seriously, especially in the medical field, which is really pretty much of a closed box. Even the Alzheimer's Association had told my boss, make sure she doesn't talk about her theories because she's a wild card, and tell her to only stick with the exact research. So I was pretty frustrated because I am an artist. I'm a freelance writer and artist, and creativity is what fuels me. And I felt that this was very restricting. I was inside the box and I couldn't get out. And so what I decided to do is I just quit and spent a year writing a book about how I saw dementia, what I felt was really going on. And that's what that book is about. It's about the science. The whole first part of the book is the actual brain science, because what I discovered with my workshops is that most people don't even know how their own brain works, let alone how the brain is, not working with dementia. I think in order to really fully understand what's happening with someone with dementia, you have to have at least an overview of how your brain functions, which, the neurons and the connections, and then what's being changed because of dementia. It makes it a lot easier for people to relate to their loved ones or the people they're caring for, if they understand that. So I have a very strong focus on the science. The Alzheimer's Association taught me that. Stick with the science, stick with the science. So I did, but then I took it farther. And I deal with focus a lot on human consciousness, perception, how we perceive the world, our emotional, the results of our emotional feelings, and because of those perceptions. So that's what the book is about. And then it goes into the spirit. It's basically a holistic book. It talks about the mind, body, and spirit. And we all have a spirit. And I think that's what gets overlooked with dementia care, is the fact that we're more than just a human meat suit. We're actually a spiritual, and I'm not talking about religion, and I'm not talking even about the soul. I don't know. But I know with science, we are energetic beings, and that's proven with science. We're composed of atoms and neutrons and protons, and then you go even smaller. And so I correlate with the science together with the reality of dementia, together with the theoretical spirituality of dementia.
And what's the kind of reaction to that? Because I do feel that there's sometimes
it's interesting. Yeah. I find it interesting because I really didn't think anybody would like that book, and I really didn't care. I was basically writing the book for myself so that I could get over the frustration of it, because after I wrote the book and published it, I got back into the field and it didn't seem to bother me so much. So it was really for my own benefit. But then I've realized that since then it's been selling pretty well, and the readers seem to get so much out of it. It's so simple. It's written in such a simple, easy to read way, which I have ADD, so I can't even read books unless they're, a certain font and, and basically have a flow to them, because otherwise I just lose interest in it. So I created a book that was probably for my own ADD. and so the feedback that I've gotten from the people that have gotten the book in Spanish too, because we published it in Spanish last year, is really phenomenal. I was super surprised. I was really surprised, because the spiritual aspect of it, especially in a Catholic country, is more, it's spiritual. It's not religious. And as a result, I don't know, people seem to relate to it because I don't specifically go into any specific religion. And it is my own beliefs and my own theories. And I don't ask the reader to believe what I believe. I just ask them, I always say, well, what if,
Yeah, I mean, there's one quote about the book says, talk about taking people beyond the mainstream of dementia information. Do you think we go too far down the medical route and the mechanics, if you like, of everything with the information we provide?
I think that's the box. I just see the whole medical machine as a box, and people don't know that there's anything outside its walls. And it's very good when someone can take them, just open up a window. All you do is open up a window. Whether they go through it or not is totally up to them, but at least give them the tools to open up that window and see beyond and think for themselves. That's what I believe. When I first started working with dementia, I had been working with street children in Central America for 15 years with arts programs. And so when I started that first workshop at that little nursing home, they had 10 residents all sitting in their chairs. And I thought, a simple watercolor program. And so I said, okay, pick up your paintbrushes. And of course, there were some people drooling and there was, other people looking off and nobody was paying attention. And I go, oh, wow, I knew nothing about dementia, nothing at all. And I said, wow, what's going on to one of the caregivers? And she said, oh, these people have Alzheimer's and dementia. They won't be able to do art. And I said, well, I don't think that's true, So I started coming to the nursing home unpaid. I was only supposed to be there one day a week. I came every single day, and sometimes I came at night. And I sat with them and I walked with them and I helped feed them. And I just observed as much as I could. I interacted. I talked with them. Then I went to the library and I started taking out videos on brain function, everything I could possibly. I would watch approximately 4 videos a day. I became very obsessed with the whole idea of what is dementia and what is the brain and what's happening to these people. So within 2 weeks, I had spent, I would say, at least 16 hours a day between actual hands-on and study and research, at least 16 hours a day for 2 weeks or 3 weeks straight. And at that point, that was when I started to develop the picture communication program for them. And because of that picture communication program, I discovered there's so much more that's inside of them than you think there is. That it's basically an inability to communicate that causes people to think they're as advanced as they are. And when they do get advanced, who's to say they're not still there? I found them, I felt that they were still there. Is the brain and the mind the same? Is brain-generated thoughts the same as the mind? Or is the mind bigger than that? Is there a consciousness that we have innately that's bigger than just the brain function? And that's my question. Even to this day, I'm still questioning this and trying to find out as much as I can.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
And I guess, it's almost like finding the key to unlock the door, isn't it, in terms of communication?
Mm-hmm. Yep. When they start to lose communication, that's when everything falls apart.
I guess that's a really difficult time for a carer as well, and the relationship between the cared for and the carer.
I think it creates an emotional distancing, which is really common because the person that they knew is disappearing, but actually the person they knew is disappearing if all they can see is their husband or all they can see is their mother or their father. If that's all they know about the person, they're disappearing. Yeah, they're going to be gone. But the person, the human being that is your mother or your father or your husband or your wife, that person is still there. That person still has a full life that didn't always revolve around you. So my part of what I recommend to people is that they start, if the person is still verbal at all, is to try to start talking to them about their past. The filters will be down and you're going to learn all kinds of things about your parents that you never imagined. Maybe some things you don't want to know, but so that you can start seeing the woman within your mother. You can start seeing the man within your father. I sometimes recommend that they call their parents by their first name instead of calling them mom and dad, because mom and dad is being lost. So call mom June or dad Frank. Try to see them as a person. It's all about perception, because what we perceive is the world that we make. That's our belief system. Our belief system is created around our perceptions, and our perceptions are a result of our belief system. It's kind of like a never-ending circle. So change your perceptions and your belief, and it becomes easier. I'm not going to say it becomes easy, but it becomes easier dealing with this condition.
Yeah, it's a holistic approach, isn't it? Of finding what's going on. You've got the medical side, but also you've got this other spiritual side, social side, and it's a kind of real mixture of It's no wonder it is difficult for carers to figure what's going on with all that happening.
Most caregivers, I'm not going to say most, but many caregivers in their own personal lives have really never thought about these things before their loved one got dementia. So as a result, it would have to be after the fact that they would learn about this. Because, most people don't think about what they perceive in the world. Most people don't think about whether their brain-generated thoughts are really less than the mind, that the mind is bigger than that. They don't think about how their brain functions. We just don't think about these things before we're confronted with a condition that forces you to. So my perception of it is to give other people a different perception, because there's a saying that when you change the way you look at something, it changes. And that's absolutely true. It's all about how you perceive something. If you ask if there's a crime committed and you ask a policeman, the policeman is asking the witnesses, if there's 5 witnesses, every single person who was there will give a different account of what they saw. Because no two people perceive the same thing in the same way. Nobody. And that has a lot to do with what's going on with dementia, because dementia is all about perception being altered. It's altered perception. And so the more you can learn about perception, healthy perception, or how you perceive, or what is perception, the more you'll understand how it's being changed in your loved one and how that affects their emotions and their behaviors.
Well, I guess there's nothing more important than actually learning about the person. Because I guess, we all carry emotional baggage around with us, don't we? And some of those unresolved emotional things, are still there.
Oh, yeah. Because I've worked with hundreds of people with dementia, hundreds of them, I've encountered pedophiles, and then also discovered that the pedophile was also abused. I've discovered abused people, the abuse, especially in our parents, because that generation was what stays behind closed doors, stays closed. And there was a lot more abuse than any of us know. So a lot of the caregivers I've found that have had really difficult childhoods with difficult parents or dysfunctional parents, I would say you could probably say 80-90% of them have had some kind of abuse in their childhood. It comes out in dementia because the filters are down. The filters disappear. One of the things that disintegrates is those emotional filters. So they can't stop themselves from getting angry, or even consider the fact that they are angry, or even know that they're angry. They're just going to act out. and anything that's from their past, they may act that out, and you're not going to know that they're actually acting out a situation from their past, because it won't be exactly what happened. It'll be more of an emotional demonstration of what happened. So it's very, very difficult understanding what's happening with them, because it's kind of the subconscious. The conscious mind, what you and I are doing right now, this discussion that we're having, is 5% of what our consciousness is doing. The subconscious is 95%. 95% is all of that programming we've had, all of our belief systems, our automatic reactions to things, as well as our automatic functions like breathing and the heart beating and so on. So, and this is subconscious. We don't know what's going on in there. So, yeah, 95% is subconscious. So what's going to be coming out when the filters come down with dementia, when there's no more ability to reason or introspection? They don't have the ability to look inside themselves or see how their reactions are affecting, how their actions are affecting other people. At some point in dementia, they lose empathy because it's just not there. The dementia will start to diminish empathy until it's not there anymore. So caregivers get very upset, thinking, well, he's so narcissistic. He just thinks about himself. I'm so tired, and I've had a terrible day. I was up with him all day. He doesn't seem to care. Well, it's not that he's doing that on purpose. That's part of the dementia symptoms. And that's one of the hardest part for caregivers. And then again, we fall right back into the emotional distancing, because they feel abused. And so then they become more and more emotionally distant. And then the problems get worse.
Yeah, and I guess there's a lot of kind of physical changes to understand as well, in terms of perception of distance and, all those kind of things as well that you have to throw into the mix.
Yeah. A lot of people don't understand what it is to lose depth perception. They lose depth perception. And you see it in nursing homes a lot, where there'll be a table of people sitting there eating, and the one person will reach across the table, will start to grasp something, try to grasp something across the table. And mostly that's not understood. Or sometimes someone thinks they're hallucinating and their arms are out in the air like they're trying to touch something invisible. Often it's something on the other side of the room or on the other side of the table. Because when you lose depth perception, everything looks like it's right in front of you. It's a two-dimensional world. Everything's right in front of you. There's no concept of how far something is far away. So stairs, for instance, you lose volume. You can't see stairs. Stairs will look like lines on the floor. So a caregiver will try, I just can't get him up the stairs or off the curb, or they can't see it because there's no depth perception. They can't tell how fast something is coming at them. So even in the early stages, when this starts to happen, often this starts to change. The depth perception starts to change even before they get into mid stages, and they might still be driving. Oh my gosh. Talk about dangerous, because they can't tell how far away something is, and they can't tell how fast it's coming towards them. So just that alone, trying to get them to sit in a chair. How far away is the seat of the chair? They don't know where it is because they can't perceive the depth. Another thing is they cannot, they have absolutely no spatial awareness. When we walk into a room, we don't fall over because our body balances itself in the space. They lose the ability to have spatial awareness. And that, to me, and this is just a theory, if you lose spatial awareness, you must feel like you're kind of floating. How would you? Because you don't feel the floor, and the space around you you can't perceive it. You can't measure where you are in the room. So it would seem to me they would feel more like they're floating in a void, even though they're seeing things, but they would feel like they're floating. And that affects balance. So a lot of these physical things aren't talked about. At least I haven't found them talked about a whole lot in the dementia information. And I think they're really important for the caregivers to truly understand those changes, the physical and the mental.
Yeah, I've had friends explain to me problems with the hearing as well, and auditory things going on, and it's so difficult to just imagine all of that, and then the stuff that we've been talking about in terms of perception. I mean, in terms of caregivers in institutional settings, residential care or whatever. What's their level of knowledge in terms of all this stuff that we've been talking about?
Minimal. That's what I believe. That's sort of I don't even want to get started there because I get real emotional about it. And it's not their fault. It's the training. When you have CNA training, you have very little training actually about perception or any of the things that we're talking about. You just basically, you learn a lot of the physical things that you're supposed to do, but the emotional aspects of interacting with your client or your patient or your resident is just not there in this training. And that includes nurses. Because I've had nurses in my talks and workshops that had no idea that a lot of these things were happening with the person. And when I was doing the seminars, I did a seminar in Missouri at a very large dementia unit, and it was for the staff. And they had been working with these people for years, and they were just bowled over with the information because it's so simple. It's really simple information, but yet it was not presented to them in their training. And these were nurses and professionals that had been working in the field for years and had never thought outside the box, because you have to think outside the box when you start thinking about these things. You take the information from all the sources that you can, but then you have to start formulating some ideas for yourself, and especially with your loved one, because your loved one is one person with dementia. So you've got to figure out their characteristics specifically and adjust to that, because, of course, not everybody with dementia is the same. But there are common symptoms. They're not the same, but there are common symptoms. But the reactions to these symptoms are not always the same.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
I guess it goes with the old saying, if you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person with dementia, because it is so variant. Time's kind of moving on. I just wanted to sort of talk a little bit about the Infinite Mind Dementia Project.
Okay. What we're doing is we're going into the rural areas. The Infinite Mind is basically connected to the concepts of the book. So it's been very interesting when I do talks, because I learn from everybody. At the same time they're learning from me, I'm learning from them. And it's basically just about delivering information about dementia and giving tips on how to interact in a better way. I'm not going to say care. My focus is more on how to communicate in a better way and how to interact with your loved one in a more effective way. So this is basically what we're teaching. And I'm going to be going into a ghetto area at the end of this month. And I'll be doing a talk there on to a ghetto area in Costa Rica is they're mostly Nicaraguan refugees. The neighborhood was created of Nicaraguan refugees, and they're extremely poor. And when you're taking care of people with dementia in a poverty situation, I mean extreme poverty, it's pretty awful. I've been to the Indian reservations here, and they had to use T-shirts and old rags for diapers, and I mean just really horrendous when poverty is also complicating taking care of someone with dementia. And in Latin American countries, unfortunately, they have a different attitude about their elderly. Unfortunately, they are uneducated about dementia, and when the problems start to hit the fan, often the person is abandoned. We have a big problem, especially around Christmas time, where they abandon their elderly in a hospital or so on. And one would say, oh, that's so horrible, but they can barely feed their family, let alone understand what's happening to the mother who's gone crazy and takes off down the street and stands out in the yard naked, or they have no concept of what to do with that. So my goal is to increase more of this awareness of what is dementia and how to communicate and interact in a more effective way to prevent emotional distancing. Emotional distancing is the biggest demon in a family, is when they start to emotionally distance themselves from their loved one because they're just a stranger at some point. Mom's not there. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, Mom, my mom isn't there anymore. Yes, she is. Your mom's not there, but the woman is still there. The woman who gave birth to you is. And until they can see that, until a caregiver can actually perceive that woman is still there, the problems escalate. And here in Costa Rica, we just have a lot of other problems that first world countries don't have. Resources. They've started to grow. We have a wonderful program for the elderly here. Like the elderly people, if you're over 65, you can ride the bus for free, for instance. You go to the front of the line. You never stand in a line if you're an elderly person. There's a lot of benefits to being an elderly person, but there are very few benefits to having dementia and being an elderly person. So there's a huge difference there. And I do believe with education, this can be changed. I'd like to see more dementia-friendly towns, like these little rural towns that I go into. You could create a network. I foresee where I want to go with this, but I'm a visionary, and it all takes time, and we move very slowly in Latin America down here. But I just keep plugging forward, like one foot in front of the other, and seem to be making some headway.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think you're doing a marvellous job. I've learned a lot in our conversation, and I hope our listeners will as well. And as we say here on the programme to everybody who does a marvellous job, please just keep on doing what you're doing.
Thank you. I plan to. It's my life's work.
My thanks to Katya, and I wish her every success with the great work she's doing in Costa Rica. Well, that's it for this edition. Hope you can join me again soon on the D Word podcast.